we talked about it a little in the beginning, where a lot of times where we've gone with the validation of skills is it really is based on, honestly, poor metrics. Like we said, well,
Mm-hmm.
you passed a test, you got 70%, so you got the full degree, and we're going to assume that means that everything in all the classes that you took and every actually carried through, and you know how to do it, or you have a certification, so you actually end up doing that. I'm curious, how are you approaching the validation of skills? Because to me, this has been one of the biggest black boxes for a lot of things over the years, where I've seen people really try and crack this and they've struggled with it. So what does that look like for you? But also, speaking more broadly, like, how do we move beyond, hey, you passed a test, or
Yeah.
you passed an oral exam, or you did this one thing really nice, and so I'm going to assume the rest?
Yeah. So it goes back to that sort of cell phone toss example. We can do this with technical skills, with soft skills, with sort of in different, depending on your region, they might be called key skills or essential skills or power skills or whatnot. But basically, our principle basically is that people are three-dimensional. Their assessments are often one-dimensional.
Okay.
How do we bring three-dimensional assessment to the table? But because let's go back to our university days for a sec, right? There is actually zero science anywhere that suggests that putting 1,500 students in a gymnasium in the middle of December is the right way to assess their knowledge and competence. And yet, okay, December after December, universities around this country, and yours and mine both, and around the world, will do that. Final exams, 3 hours, high stakes exams, time boxed. If you talk to anybody, if you collaborate with anybody, we call that cheating. You get kicked out of the exam room. Right?
And the very thing we're trying to build skills in companies, which is how do you work together with people and collaborate? We're like, no, but if you do that, we're going to fail you.
That's right. We call that cheating. And it's laughable. Look, it is laughable, man. Like it's universities, colleges, lots of really cool things going on that are trying to reform the way we do assessment, because assessment then becomes a gatekeeper to whether or not a student can become a productive worker. If you don't get enough of those multiple choice tests right, you don't get the degree. Now, we're seeing a lot of things around skills-based organizations, skills-based hiring. I always ask the question quietly in my head, well, how? Like, how are people actually doing skills-based hiring? Like, again, this is not just meant to be a nonstop marketing pitch, but it's like, I know we help that conversation. How are others doing it? Because how do you give people credit for their server skills in a restaurant to then do customer support in IT? There's a lot of overlapping skills. I agree. We should do skills-based hiring, but how are people actually doing it? This is what I'm really interested in finding out more and more about, because we know that the world is moving to the skills-based way. So how do we do it? We take three-dimensional multimedia assessments. Again, not a brand new idea. We threw the idea of VHS tapes around, right? This idea of three-dimensional assessments then needs to be met with another critical component, which is they need to be auditable. Okay. They need to stand up under scrutiny. And so you take vocationally competent people, right? And they're assessing through Validate these three-dimensional pieces of evidence. But even that, right? Like, one of the big pluses to that whole multiple choice exam in the gymnasium thing is at the end of that exam, you just filter in the Scantron through the machine and it just reads everything. And look, your assessment is done. Wash your hands of that, take the mark, and off you go. And that next term starts, and just do it again with the next 1,500 students. So then our question became, how do we do this just as quickly? Because overarchingly, most of our market is 16 years and up, right? So predominantly adult learners, a little bit of sort of pre-apprentice workforce development type of stuff around youth engagement, CTE. And then adult learners going into corporate and sort of employers. The question is, how do you create these multimedia assessments that are super valuable for all of these stakeholders? And how do you do it in a way that you can grow and create career pathways, and you can grow and create these personalized highlight reels, and there's a million different credentialing possibilities in the United States right now. A million. If you're an 18-year-old, and I realize this is not necessarily the University College podcast, but there's a million different credentialing pathways right now. It's a big, as it is,
it's honestly overwhelming. I know a lot of people who are kind of the Gen Z group coming up in this, trying to figure out how do I actually navigate this, because there are so many pathways.
And also, you know, you're an executive or have been an executive at a healthcare organization, right, Chris?
Yep.
The question is, does that mean you could not be an executive at a fintech company or a bicycle manufacturer? I would say, of course you can, right? And so finding this ability, going sort of circling back, and so finding this ability to understand, well, what are the skills that just make you a good executive? What are the skills that make you good at customer service, so you can go from that restaurant job to that customer IT job? And how do we do that as quickly as possible? How do we how close can we come to matching the efficiency of throwing a Scantron into a machine and just reading it out? How close can we get to that level of efficiency? That's what Validate ultimately does. So you take all those pieces, right? Quick and efficient, fine. Auditable, super important. Multimedia assessments that are deemed to be vocationally competent by, again, assessors who are vocationally competent. And that sort of mix gives us what Validate does at the end of the day, is this idea that, you know, this stands up under scrutiny. And now as an employer, you've effectively de-risked your entire recruitment or skills development process. You've brought it down next to zero.